Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot into the salt-sweet wind on the edge of a forgotten world. The sand is cool beneath your toes, the last glow of dusk painting the clouds above Lindisfarne in streaks of fire and violet. You pause, just listen. Can you hear it? The hush of evening settling over the monastery, a kind of silence that swallows every worry and hushes even the rowdiest thoughts in your skull. Somewhere behind the ancient stone walls, candle flames gutter and monks murmur prayers in voices soft as river moss. You can almost smell the wax, the faint spice of incense, and the seaweed tang that sneaks in every time someone opens a door to the night. You're not just a guest here. Tonight you're one of the community, your fingers stained with ink, your shoulders sore from hauling buckets of rainwater, your mind as cluttered and restless as any other on this narrow patch of holy ground. But as darkness thickens and the island shrinks to a pool of wavering candlelight, you begin to sense the weight of centuries pressing down, gentle and patient as a hand on your back. Out there beyond the thin line of surf, the world can be wild, cruel, and loud. Here, for a moment, there is only calm. Of course, you probably won't survive this. Monks rarely make the headlines for their life expectancy, and let's face it, this is not a story about early retirement or sensible investments. So, before we drift any deeper, if this hushed little corner brings you even a flicker of calm, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right in your chest. And if you want to anchor this moment to the map of your own life, drop your location and local time in the comments. You never know what other midnight listeners are curled up across the world, eavesdropping on the same story. Now breathe slow, let the weight fall off your shoulders, and sink with me into tonight's slow unraveling of the past. Right here on Historian's Diary. You step softly between the sea and the stone. The island of Lindisfarne is little more than a blot of land at the rim of the North Sea, so easily missed on a map that it might as well not exist, except for those who have made it their whole universe. Here, tide and time dance together, sometimes separating the monks from the mainland, sometimes ushering in carts of bread and bolts of rough wool from far off Durham. The rhythm is ancient and relentless. The monks say God keeps the tide book in his pocket, but you're starting to suspect he's got a mischievous side, especially when the rain rolls sideways and soaks your one dry tunic. Just after laundry day, evening prayers have ended, the echoes of plain chant still clinging to the arched ceilings. You let your feet guide you through the cloister, each step muffled by centuries of worn flagstone. The lanterns sway in the wind. Somewhere nearby, Brother Osric sneezes, and you wonder, not for the first time, whether monks are allowed to have allergies. The great scriptorium is dark now, scrolls and inkpots set aside until morning. There's comfort in routine, chores, prayers, meals as predictable as sunrise. But beneath that gentle predictability, you can't help feeling a low secret hum, a restlessness maybe, or the sense that someone is watching from the darkness outside the walls. Not that you're about to admit that, of course. Superstition isn't encouraged, except on feast days and in the vegetable garden, where nothing seems to grow unless you promise it half your soul and at least 2 hours of Gregorian chant. The coastline is jagged, black rock and weed, treacherous for ships, but perfect for brooding walks. Sometimes you go out with the novices, poking among tide pools for lost coins, listening to the sea's slow lecture on patience. There are seals too. Sometimes they look almost human, their big round eyes fixed on you as if they're waiting for you to spill your darkest secrets. You suspect they're better listeners than Brother Cedric, whose advice is mostly pray harder and stop losing your sandals. It's impossible not to notice how small you feel here, pressed between the endless sky and the endless sea. Yet the monastery rises, stone by stone, memory by memory, its heart a humming hive of activity. The kitchen smells of burnt barley and boiled onions, but tonight, for a rare treat, there's a whiff of honey cake drifting from a window left open, just a crack. You're tempted to steal a piece, but the last time you tried, you nearly got caught by Sister Etheldreda, whose glare could sour milk. To this day, you're convinced she can see through stone walls. Inside, the church's high windows catch the last scraps of daylight. Candles flicker along the nave, their flames drawing thin lines of gold on the ancient floor. You're not sure if you believe in miracles, but something about this place, about this night, feels thick with meaning, like the moment before a storm breaks. You catch yourself wishing for a sign, just a tiny one, maybe a shooting star, or, at the very least, a night without chores. No such luck. Before you can disappear into a quiet corner with a smuggled apple, you hear footsteps behind you. It's the abbot. His face kind and tired, as if he's been awake for a century. "All is well?" he asks, his voice soft enough that you could almost pretend he's talking to himself. You nod, because what else is there to say? "The world turns," he murmurs, "and we turn with it. Rest, child. Tomorrow is another long day." As you wander back toward your cell, you pass the dormitory, rows of rough straw mattresses, the wheeze and mutter of monks settling in. Somewhere, a novice giggles and is immediately shushed. Someone is whispering the story of St. Cuthbert again, a tale you've heard 1,000 times, about how the great saint once stood on this very shore and dared the sea to drown his prayers. Sometimes you wonder if the story is true, or if Cuthbert was just better at bluffing the tide than you. You lie down, pulling the coarse blanket to your chin. The wind moans through the walls like a lost soul looking for dinner. Your mind drifts, skipping from one thought to another. The weight of the day's work in your muscles, the taste of cold porridge, the memory of a single glorious honey cake, last feast day. You think of your family, somewhere far away, maybe huddled by a fire, maybe already asleep. Do they miss you? Do they know you miss them? You're not sure. It's in the thick, velvety dark that the island comes alive. Every creak of timber and snap of wind seems to hint at something just out of sight. The sea is a constant, pulsing presence, sometimes roaring, sometimes whispering, always there as if waiting for you to make a mistake. The monks say that faith is an anchor, but tonight you feel as though you're floating unmoored in a world both beautiful and terrifying. You can't sleep, not really. Instead, you listen to the rise and fall of breath around you, to the strange music of a place where men have come to lose themselves and maybe find something great. You think about the stories you've heard, of miracles and martyrdoms, of saints who spoke with otters and kings who wept in the cloister. There's a comfort in the old tales, even if you suspect half of them were invented by bored scribes desperate for something to write between taxes and plagues. And just as your eyelids start to droop, the bells ring for night prayer. You groan softly, so as not to wake Brother Alfred, who snores with the enthusiasm of a dozen sheep. But you haul yourself upright and shuffle into the chapel, where the air is thick with the smell of smoke and sleep. You chant, you kneel, you wonder what God thinks of tired feet and wandering thoughts. Finally, at the end of the longest day, you slip back into your cell and let sleep claim you. Outside, the moon climbs high, the tide rolls in, the world holds its breath. Somewhere, far off, a ship cuts silently across the dark water, its sail taut with wind. You dream of nothing. You wake in the blue-grey murk before dawn, the monastery still wrapped in sleep and mist. It's that liminal hour, when everything feels softer and secrets seem to drift on the tides. There's a kind of peace here, a gentle routine that holds the fear of the world at bay. But lately something prickles in the air. Even if you tell yourself it's nothing, the feeling lingers, as insistent as the gulls that scold each other atop the wind-worn walls. You rise, feet cold against the flagstones, and shrug on your coarse wool robe. Breakfast is thin and hurried, bread torn and swallowed between sleepy glances. The monks gather for morning prayers, voices blending into the ancient walls. But beneath the melody, there's a tension you can almost taste. Whispers skitter along the benches. Did you hear what the shepherd saw last night? Did you see those strange marks washed up on the shore? As you file out, Brother Ethelred sidles up beside you, his brow furrowed. They say ships have been spotted, out past the far rocks, he murmurs. Not traders, no banners. His voice is a hush, but it sends a shiver down your back. You know the rules. Never give in to gossip. Trust in God's protection. But even the abbot's smile is thinner these days. The day unfolds as usual, or at least tries to. You copy verses in the scriptorium, but your quill slips, blotting the page, your mind wandering far from the Gospel of Matthew. It's hard to focus when, every so often, a novice pokes his head through the door, face pale, eyes too wide, and then vanishes before Brother Anselm can scold him for running indoors. At lunch, the talk is of ships again. Not just one, but two. maybe 3. Seen from the cliffs by Brother Edwin, who swears he knows a fishing vessel from a raider's longship. His uncle once traded with Norsemen, also he claims. The monks trade stories in low voices, careful not to let the novices hear the sharp edge beneath their words. Remember last winter, someone says, when the cattle vanished and we found the hoofprints heading north. The others nod, glancing toward the doors as if expecting trouble to walk in and sit down for stew. And what about the men at Bamberg, said they, they'd strange coins in the river, foreign, with faces not our own. The abbot tries to calm everyone. God is our shield, he insists, and the king's men keep watch over the coast. But it's hard to find comfort in promises when you've seen the sea turn on a whim, dragging ships down without warning. The truth is, here at the edge of the world, you're always at the mercy of what comes in with the tide. After the meal, you help tend the animals. The cows seem restless, stamping and snorting at shadows. Even the chickens are jumpy, scattering at the slightest sound. Brother Cedric cracks a nervous joke about the chickens organizing a rebellion, and you laugh just a little too loudly. Sometimes the only armor you have is a well-timed quip, and the hope nobody notices your hands are shaking. The sky darkens earlier than usual, thick clouds rolling in from the sea. You watch the horizon as you haul buckets, your eyes drawn to the strip of water where the sky meets the unknown. For a heartbeat, you think you see something moving. Black shapes, slow and purposeful, slipping between the waves. You blink, and they're gone. Imagination, you tell yourself. Just the wind and the sea playing tricks. Back in the kitchen, Brother Osric sharpens his knife with more force than necessary, muttering about old legends, men with axes, faces painted, storms following in their wake. You're about to tease him for his dramatic flair, but the words die on your tongue. You're all thinking the same thing. After all, at dusk the abbey gathers in the church for evening prayer. The candles flicker, painting shadows across the stone. The abbot's voice is steady, but you notice his hands trembling as he blesses the bread. You kneel, repeating the familiar words, your mind drifting to the stories you heard as a child. Monsters from the north, dragons that come by sea. You know it's superstition, but superstition is easy to believe when you're small, and the world suddenly feels big and dangerous. After prayers, you wander the cloister, heart hammering. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the shutters and whistling through every crack. You find Brother Alwyn at the edge of the garden, eyes fixed on the darkening horizon. Do you hear it? He whispers. You strain to listen. Just the surf, the wind, and then maybe something else. Drums? Oars? Your mind races, inventing noises where there are none. You try to laugh it off. Maybe it's just the seals throwing a party again, but the joke falls flat. Even the seals, those blubbery old gossips, have kept to deeper water lately. As night creeps in, the monks gather in 2s and 3s, huddling for warmth and reassurance. You overhear snippets of conversations, prayers for safety, worries about family left on the mainland, fears too old and deep to name. The monastery has always been a refuge, but tonight it feels exposed, a lone candle in a sea of darkness. You retreat to the dormitory, but sleep is stubborn, refusing to settle. Your mind won't stop spinning. Images of ships, fire, the cold splash of seawater in the dark. You remember a tale Brother Cedric once told about a monastery far to the south that was swallowed by the sea after a single monstrous wave. You try to shake the thought, but it clings, sticky as pitch. Sometime after midnight you rise and pad softly to the window. The moon is a pale smear behind thick clouds, but for a moment you see it, a flash of movement, far out on the water, sails or shadows. You hold your breath, counting heartbeats, listening for the sound of oars. Nothing, only the restless sigh of the wind. You wonder if you should wake the abbot. You imagine his gentle, tired face, the way he tries to shoulder everyone's burdens at once. Maybe he already knows. Maybe he's praying for the strength to face whatever comes. You slip back to your bed, pulling the blanket tight around your shoulders. All across the dormitory, men lie awake, staring into the dark. Some whisper prayers, others clutch wooden crosses or bits of bone. A saint's relic, a family keepsake, a talisman against the unknown. You realize, with a strange comfort, that fear is as much a part of monastic life as prayer or work. You breathe slow, counting each inhale, each exhale, trying to steady the wild flutter of your heart. Somewhere, a bell chimes. You lose track of time, drifting between waking and sleep. In your dreams, the sea is full of eyes, watching, waiting. When you wake again, dawn is a rumor on the horizon, and the world feels changed. You join the others for morning prayers, moving through the motions as if in a trance. The scriptorium feels colder, the ink stiffer in your fingers. Brother Anselm says nothing, but he watches the door with every scrape of your quill. At midday, a runner arrives from the mainland, his cloak soaked, his face wild with fear. He brings news of attacks further north. Villages burned, men slain, no warning given. The room goes silent. Even Brother Cedric is quiet, his usual jokes shriveled on his lips. The abbot gathers everyone in the chapel, his voice unsteady as he urges calm and faith. "We have weathered storms before," he says. "We are under God's protection." But even as he speaks, you sense he is preparing for the worst, gathering the relics, hiding what valuables he can, instructing the youngest novices to stay close. The rest of the day passes in a blur of preparation and half-hearted routine. You stack sacks of grain in the cellar, check the latches on the doors, memorize escape routes you hope you'll never need. The air is thick with unspoken fears. Each man lost in his own worries. You catch yourself wishing for something foolish, a dragon to carry you away, a king's army to ride up the causeway, anything to break the tension that stretches tighter with every hour. By nightfall, the wind has risen to a howl, battering the windows with sheets of salt spray. You huddle in the dormitory, listening to the voices of your brothers, soft, uncertain, trying to comfort, trying to believe that dawn will bring nothing worse than another day of chores and prayers. But as you finally drift towards sleep, you can't shake the sense that the world is holding its breath. The peace of Lindisfarne is fraying at the edges, and somewhere, just beyond the reach of your prayers, you sense the story is about to change. Sleep is a fragile thing tonight, broken and shallow as the sea glass scattered along Lindisfarne's northern shore. You toss and turn beneath your rough blanket, listening to the wind fret and moan around the stones. Every noise is louder than usual. The snap of a shutter, the creak of beams settling, the distant rumble of waves gnawing the cliffs. It's as if the island itself knows something is coming, and the world is waiting for a shoe to drop, one made of iron and terror. It's late, and you should be resting, but instead you sit by the narrow window, the night's cold curling around your ankles. Outside, the moon huddles behind clouds, making shadows twist in strange ways across the fields. Your breath fogs the glass. You remember a joke Brother Cedric told, something about monks being like onions, full of layers and guaranteed to make you cry if you get too close. You almost smile. Almost. You close your eyes, trying to summon calm, but your mind is a hive of worry. What if the rumors are true? What if the ships are already out there, slipping closer while everyone sleeps? You picture long, lean hulls gliding across the water, silent as predators. You shake yourself, superstition again. But the unease lingers, sticky as lamp oil. You're not the only one awake. Down the corridor, someone stifles a cough. Footsteps whisper past your door. Careful and hesitant, you hear the scrape of a stool in the scriptorium, the soft hiss of a candle being coaxed to life. Others are keeping vigil, whether they admit it or not. Some are praying, some are just trying to keep busy, to trick their hearts into thinking everything is as it should be. By the time the bell tolls for night prayer, you're already halfway to the chapel. The cold bites your skin, your breath hangs in the air, and you pull your robe tighter around your shoulders. The nave is dim, only a handful of candles burning, their light trembling like frightened thoughts. The faces around you are hollow-eyed, tense. The abbot's voice is steady, but you can see the white of his knuckles as he grips the lectern. You kneel, trying to focus on the prayers. The words rise and fall, a rhythm older than any fear, but your thoughts are miles away, chasing shapes in the darkness outside. The monks chant psalms about protection and deliverance, about enemies falling back before the might of faith. But the old stories crawl at the back of your mind, stories of monasteries burned, of saints slain at the altar, of invaders who laughed at prayers and left nothing but ashes. After prayers, a few monks linger, talking in hushed voices. You overhear plans, what to do if the bell is sounded in the night, where to hide the youngest novices, which passages might lead to safety, or at least to somewhere less obvious than the main gate. You're handed a bundle of keys by Brother Edwin, who tells you to check the locks on the east storeroom, just in case, he mutters, voice thin as parchment. You step outside, the cold slicing deep, and skirt the edges of the cloister with your lamp held high. Every shadow feels alive. You tell yourself it's just nerves, just the dark playing tricks, but as you pause at the storeroom door, you hear it, a sound carried on the wind. At first you think it's the sea, or maybe a distant gull, but then you realize it's voices, not the chanting of monks, not the sleepy mutter of fishermen, but harsh, guttural, unfamiliar. You freeze, heart hammering, listening as the voices fade and rise again. You hurry back, pulse racing, and lock the door behind you. Inside, the lamp's glow feels feeble, barely holding the darkness at bay. You bump into Brother Osric, who startles so hard he nearly drops the loaf of bread he's pilfered from the kitchen. "Storm's coming," he whispers, trying for bravado. "Good night for staying in." You nod, but neither of you laughs. Back in the dormitory, the monks are restless. Some pace, some pray, some stare into nothing, faces drawn tight with worry. You overhear a novice confess his fear to Brother Morace. "Do you think they'll come for us? Like they did at Portland last year?" Morace puts a hand on the boy's shoulder, murmuring about faith and courage, but his eyes are far away. The wind rises, howling against the stones, rattling the shutters, so hard you worry they'll come loose. Rain spits against the windows, sharp as thrown pebbles. Every so often, lightning flickers on the horizon, briefly illuminating the wild, hungry sea. You count the seconds until thunder rolls in, the old superstition promising safety if you make it to 10 before the crash. Sometimes you reach 8, sometimes you barely get to 3. You lie down again, but your mind won't rest. You think of the relics hidden beneath the altar, the precious manuscripts stacked in the scriptorium, the simple treasures that mean so much to this place. You remember stories of saints whose faith shielded them from harm, but you also remember the bones buried out in the graveyard, markers of those for whom faith was not enough. At some point, you drift into a shallow, uneasy sleep. You dream of waves, of fire, of voices shouting in a language you do not know. You wake gasping, sweat cold on your neck, the storm's roar filling your ears. You're not sure if the crash you just heard was thunder or something breaking. You rise again, unable to stay still, and find your way to the small chapel at the edge of the cloister. You light a candle and sit, letting its tiny flame anchor you in the tumult. Around you, the wind whips and howls, rain lashes the glass, and you feel, for a moment, utterly alone. Then you hear it, another set of footsteps, and the abbot enters, shoulders stooped, face drawn. He sits beside you without a word, the silence heavy but companionable. After a while, he says, "Sometimes all we can do is wait, pray, hold each other close. The world turns, and we turn with it." His voice is soft as if talking to himself. You nod, comforted despite everything. Hours pass, measured in the flicker of candlelight and the roar of the wind. Eventually the sky begins to lighten, the storm spending itself in fitful bursts. The worst, you think, is over. But then, as the sun begins to claw its way above the horizon, you see them, shapes moving on the water, black against the pale dawn. At first, you squint, thinking it's just the last tatters of the storm, but no, they're too regular, too purposeful. Long, low, swift, longships. Your heart stutters. The abbot sees them too, rising slowly to his feet, eyes wide with horror and awe. Bells ring out, high and panicked, scattering birds from the cloister roof. Monks spill from the buildings, shouting, grabbing what they can. Someone cries out, "To the church, to the relics." Another, "To the fields, hide." The day is barely born, and already it is shattered. You realize, with a jolt, that the storm was only the beginning. The true trial is just arriving, sliding silently, inexorably, out of the dawn and onto the sand. You remember, Suddenly, the old stories told by the fire of saints, who faced down monsters and devils, of martyrs who found courage in terror. You wonder what kind of story this will become, and whether your name will be spoken with reverence, or sorrow, or simply lost to the tide. The first cries go up as the raiders draw near, and you are swept along in the chaos, a leaf in a river, helpless to stop what comes next. The vigil is over, the storm has broken, Lindisfarne stands on the edge of history, and you are right there with it, breathless and afraid. Dawn barely has a chance to brush the sea with gold before everything is torn wide open. You are still standing in the chapel doorway, heart pounding so loud it drowns out even the shrill alarm bell, when the first longship slides onto the sand, its prow carved like a dragon's snarl, its oars dipping in perfect, ruthless rhythm. More follow, black hulls gliding through the tide, as if they own the sea. You count 1, 2, 3, then you lose track, your mind a blur of fear and disbelief. The shouts begin. Raiders? 2 arms? But you know, and everyone knows, that Lindisfarne is not a fortress. The walls were built to keep out the cold, not war. There are a few rusty swords, maybe an old spear or two, but no one here is a soldier. The monks scramble, grabbing what little they can. One hauls a silver chalice from the altar, another clutches a battered copy of the Gospels. You see Brother Cedric hustling a trio of terrified novices toward the cloister, his lips moving in frantic prayer, or perhaps, knowing Cedric, a mixture of curses and last-ditch encouragement. You dash toward the scriptorium, driven by a sudden desperate urge to save something, anything, that might outlast the day. Pages scatter in your wake. You snatch a vellum manuscript and press it tight to your chest, as if words alone could shield you from what's coming. The ground shudders beneath your feet. The shouting outside rises to a fever pitch. Through the narrow window you see them, Vikings leaping from their ships, shields slung on their backs, axes gleaming. They move like they've done this 100 times. Maybe they have. They don't roar like the stories say, they don't need to. Their presence is a shout all its own. The first monks to reach the gate try to close it, but the wood buckles under the weight of panic and muscle. The Vikings spill in, fierce, tall, eyes bright with a mix of hunger and something almost like joy. You lock eyes with one, just for a heartbeat, a face smeared with war paint, teeth bared in a grin that is neither cruel nor kind, just certain. You look away first. Chaos erupts. The air is split by the clash of metal, the scream of someone, maybe Brother Osric, calling for help, then choking on the effort. You push deeper into the monastery, skidding on fallen tiles, ducking under an archway just as a shadow passes by. It's all happening too fast and too slow at once. You try to remember the abbot's instructions. Find shelter, keep faith, but your legs seem to have their own plans, carrying you wherever fear points. A group of monks forms a trembling line at the steps of the church, holding nothing but walking sticks and the conviction that God, perhaps, will recognize courage. The Vikings pause, and for a single surreal moment, everyone just stares at each other. Then a monk throws a rock. It bounces harmlessly off a shield, but the spell is broken. The raiders surge forward. You see Brother Edwin, brave and foolish, swinging a wooden cross like a club. He's shouting something you can't make out. Latin, perhaps, or a farmer's curse. For a breath, he seems larger than life. But then the Vikings close in, and you look away. You hear the sound of splintering wood and wonder briefly whether saints are allowed to punch people in the afterlife. You dart past the kitchen, the smell of burnt porridge and smoke suddenly thick in the air. Someone has set a fire. Whether by accident or intent, you can't tell. You cough, eyes watering, and nearly collide with a novice holding a broken candlestick like a sword. Hide, he shouts. They're everywhere. He bolts down a side corridor, and you hope for his sake that he knows it better than you do. The church bells ring and ring, their frantic tolling cutting through the chaos like a knife. But no help is coming. The causeway is already swamped by the rising tide, and the mainland is nothing but a distant promise. In the cloister, the fighting spills over the flower beds, trampling the neat rows of cabbages and onions. For a wild moment you think of Brother Cedric's complaint that nothing good ever happens to the onions, and you almost laugh. Almost. But the terror closes in, too quickly. You slip through a half-open door, heart racing, the manuscript still pressed to your chest. Inside, it's cool and dim, the air thick with incense and fear. You crouch behind a chest, every sense straining for sounds, footsteps, voices. The sharp ring of iron. You pray, silently, frantically, promising everything, if only you might survive this day. For a moment, time seems to stop. You remember a lesson from Brother Maurice. In every storm, find your stillness. You clutch the memory like a talisman. Outside, the chaos rages. You hear the crash of doors being battered down, the cries of men, the guttural calls of the raiders. You grip the manuscript tighter, feeling the raised letters beneath your fingers. It's not much, but it's a link to something enduring, an anchor in a world gone mad, but hiding only lasts so long. A group of Vikings bursts into the room, boots pounding, weapons drawn. They barely glance at you before turning over chests and smashing open cupboards. One, a woman with a long braid and a face as weathered as driftwood, pauses to squint at you. You freeze, expecting the worst. Instead, she grabs the nearest candlestick and tosses it into a sack, then jerks her head for you to get out. You don't wait for a second invitation. You dash into the corridor, nearly tripping over Brother Alwyn, who's trying to drag a wounded monk to safety. You help, together pulling him into the shadow of the altar. "Thank you," Alwyn whispers, tears cutting clean tracks through the ash on his face. "God keep us," you answer, but the words feel small. The sound of shattering glass echoes through the nave. You risk a glance and see a Viking wrenching the golden cross from the altar, stuffing it into a sack already bulging with silver plates and chalices. Another swings a torch, setting fire to the embroidered altar cloth. The flames catch, curling up the wall. The smoke thickens, stinging your eyes, making it hard to breathe. Somewhere nearby, someone starts singing a trembling, wavering hymn. At first it's one voice, then another joins in, and another, until the ruins ring with a desperate chorus. You add your own voice, barely above a whisper, clinging to the familiar words as if they can keep the roof from falling in. Outside, you hear the shouts of the raiders as they loot the storehouses. A crash, a shriek, the low, menacing growl of a man issuing orders in a language you do not understand. The violence is as swift as the tide and as unstoppable, but it's not indiscriminate. There's a purpose to the chaos, a method to the madness. They're looking for treasure, gold, silver, holy things, anything that might be valuable, portable, or sacred. You watch as the abbot, his robe torn and face smeared with blood, tries to shield a cluster of terrified novices. A Viking shoulders him aside and rips a silver-bound gospel from his hands. The abbot stumbles but does not fall. Instead, he draws himself upright, meeting the raider's gaze with a stubborn, weary defiance. For a moment, the Viking seems almost impressed. He grins, says something to his comrades, and leaves the abbot standing, empty-handed but unbowed. Through the smoke and panic, you spot Brother Cedric, dragging a battered relic box toward a hidden alcove. He winks at you, his usual bravado flickering through the fear. "If we live, drinks on me," he shouts, then disappears behind a curtain. You can't help but smile, even as tears sting your eyes. A group of monks makes a run for the garden gate, but the raiders are faster. You see them herded together, hands raised, as their captors bark orders and prod them with spear butts. The monks kneel, heads bowed, trembling not just from fear but from shock, their world undone in an hour. All around you, Lindisfarne burns. The ancient roofs crackle, smoke billows skyward, and the shrines you tended only yesterday are shattered beneath foreign boots. Yet through the chaos there are flashes of kindness. One raider nudges a crying novice toward the kitchen, where the smoke is less thick. Another throws a loaf of bread at a group of captives, as if to say, "Eat if you can." You remember the old stories, the ones about monsters from the sea, but the reality is more complicated, and in some ways, more terrifying. At last the violence begins to ebb. The Vikings gather their loot, shouting orders to one another, dragging prisoners and treasures back to the waiting longships. You crouch in the shadows, watching as your world is loaded into boats. Chalices, manuscripts, even the ancient stones pried from the church walls. You want to shout, to run, to do something, but your body won't move. As the last raiders depart, you stumble into the open. The silence that follows is heavier than the noise, a deep aching void. The bells are gone, the altar stripped, the air choked with ash and grief. You look around and realize Lindisfarne is changed forever. You are changed forever. You collapse to your knees, the manuscript still clutched to your chest, and sob until there are no more tears left. The sun has climbed high, indifferent and cold. You close your eyes and whisper a prayer, not for miracles, but for strength to face whatever comes next. The world has ended, and you are still here. The air is a bitter cocktail of smoke, salt, and the acrid tang of burned linen. You scramble from your hiding place, half crawling, half running, your legs jelly and your heart pounding so hard you're sure everyone can hear it, if there's anyone left to hear at all. Lindisfarne, your quiet island world, has become a place of shrieks, shattered glass and frantic movement. Even the gulls have fled the carnage. Outside, the first thing you see is the bodies, some sprawled in awkward prayer, others huddled together as if a group embrace could turn away axe and sword. You want to look away, but your eyes refuse to obey, caught on the wild tangle of robes, the scattered beads of a rosary, the glint of blood where once there was only sunlight. You force yourself to your feet, clutching the half-scorched manuscript to your chest, your mind a storm of guilt and disbelief. The chaos isn't over, not by a long shot. The Vikings are everywhere, some torching the storehouses, others yanking gold plates from the altar or prying the jeweled cover from a gospel. Every sound is magnified. The guttural bark of orders, the crash of a chest broken open, the sudden raw scream of someone you know. You duck behind the remnants of the herb garden wall, breath coming in ragged gulps, trying to decide, run, hide, or absurd as it seems. Help. A young novice, barefoot and wild-eyed, darts across the cloister, chased by two Vikings. Your first impulse is to shout, to draw their attention away, but you clamp your hand over your mouth. Instead, you watch as the novice dives under a broken cart. The raiders too large to follow, they curse and move on, and you exhale so hard you nearly collapse. You edge your way along the shattered wall, flinching at every shadow. Somewhere, Brother Cedric is shouting, his voice hoarse but defiant. You catch sight of him for a heartbeat, swinging a broken broom at a Viking twice his size. The Viking, perhaps amused, swats Cedric aside, but doesn't strike again. Maybe even he can't bring himself to kill a man wielding a broom and blind optimism. You see Cedric stagger to his feet, blood trickling from his scalp, and disappear behind a toppled statue of St. Cuthbert. In the midst of carnage, there are moments of courage. You see the abbot, his robes torn, standing in the doorway of the church, blocking entry with nothing but his body. A raider approaches, swinging his axe like a man reaping wheat, but the abbot refuses to move. He speaks, his words lost in the tumult, but his stance unwavering. For a second you believe in miracles. The Viking pauses, shrugs and brushes past, leaving the old man standing, shuddering, but unbroken. You almost cheer, but your throat is too tight for sound. You move toward the dormitory, dodging the chaos, heart hammering. The halls are full of noise and panic. Monks shouting, some fighting back with whatever comes to hand, a candle, a bench, even a crust of bread thrown in desperate futility. Others scrambling for shelter behind overturned beds. You duck into the library, half expecting to find it empty, but a cluster of terrified brothers is huddled there, clutching books to their chests, as if words alone could shield them. Brother Anselm, usually so calm, is rocking back and forth, eyes fixed on the door. You kneel beside him, pressing the half-burned manuscript into his hands. Hide it, you whisper. If you can, he nods, tucking it under his robe, and then because you can't help yourself, you grab his hand just for a moment and squeeze. We'll get through, you say, but you don't know if you believe it. Suddenly, a group of Vikings burst in, their axes dripping with rain and something darker. They scan the room, eyes hungry, but seem more interested in the gold leaf on the shelves than the men themselves. One yanks a book from the nearest monk, flips through it with a frown, then tosses it aside. Another grabs a candelabra and shoves it into his sack. The leader, tall, red-haired, eyes as cold as the North Sea, orders the others out, but not before giving you all a look that says, "Stay, and you live for now." As soon as they're gone, you pull the brothers to their feet. "We have to move," you hiss, not sure where safety is anymore. Together, you sneak through the back passages, stumbling over broken pews and the bodies of those who didn't make it. At one point, you trip over a fallen novice, face as white as linen, and you have to bite your lip to keep from crying out. Brother Unsol makes the sign of the cross, and you keep moving. Outside, the courtyard is a battlefield. Smoke coils from burning thatch, ashes drift on the wind. A group of monks has been forced to their knees, hands behind their heads. The raiders move among them, picking out the strong and the young, binding wrists with coarse rope. You know what this means. Slaves for the long journey home. Your stomach churns. You dart behind the ruins of the scriptorium, catching your breath. In the distance, the sound of horses, raiders who brought their own, or maybe just rounding up the monastery's old nags for sport. There's a wild, feverish energy to the attackers. Glee, maybe, or just the high of conquest. One of them is singing, a rough, tuneless chant, and for a moment, it almost drowns out the moans of the wounded. You spot Brother Osric, pinned beneath a fallen beam, his face twisted in pain. You rush to him, heedless of your own safety, and together with another monk, you haul the wood away. Osric gasps, then grins. "I always knew you'd come back for me, even if it's just to steal my sandals," you laugh, a ragged, desperate sound, and help him to his feet. "Come on," you urge. "We're not done yet." You move toward the kitchen, where the door has been battered off its hinges. Inside, the fire still burns, sending up thick, choking smoke. A group of raiders is rifling through barrels and sacks, scooping up whatever food they can find. One grabs a honey cake, bites into it, and immediately spits it out, too stale even for a Viking apparently. You almost want to thank the cook for that small victory. Suddenly, there's a shout from the yard. You peek around the doorframe and see a Viking leader, broad-shouldered with gold rings in his beard, calling his men to gather. The looting is slowing. They're organizing the spoils. You see them hauling chests, sacks of grain, stolen chalices, anything portable. The monks who aren't dead or wounded are being driven into a tight huddle, herded toward the boats. You realize that if you're going to escape, it has to be now. You grab Osric's arm. "We're going," you whisper. "Now." Together, you slip along the garden wall, ducking into the shadows of the crumbling stones. The noise behind you is immense. Shouts, cries, the deep, animal roar of triumph. You flinch as a spear clatters to the ground nearby, but no one follows. The Vikings are focused on their spoils. You make it to the outer edge of the monastery, the sea spray cold on your face. The sky is smeared with smoke, but in the distance beyond the chaos, you see the mainland, a world away and utterly unreachable. The causeway is flooded, the only route cut off by the tide. There's nowhere to go but back. Osric squeezes your shoulder. "At least we tried," he says, and you manage a weak smile. "Next time, let's hide in the wine cellar," he laughs, then winces, clutching his side. You turn back toward the ruins, drawn by a terrible loyalty. This is your home, after all. You can't just abandon it. Not yet. You creep along the edge of the cloister, watching as the last pockets of resistance are snuffed out. The abbot is still standing, surrounded by the battered survivors. You see him catch your eye and nod. Just once. It's enough. A Viking approaches, dragging a monk by the arm. He barks something in his own language, and the monk whimpers. Without thinking, you step forward. "Take me instead," you say, your voice barely steady. The Viking frowns, then shrugs. He lets go of his captive and grabs you, twisting your arms behind your back. The last thing you see before you're shoved into the group of prisoners is Osric, limping away, face set with determination. You join the others, hands bound, fear simmering just beneath the surface. Around you, the raiders finish their work, setting the last fires, kicking over statues, shouting in a rough alien tongue. The boats are waiting, and you realize that soon you may be on one, headed for a place you can't imagine. But for now, you are here, alive, heart pounding, surrounded by the ruins of everything you knew. You think of the quiet mornings, the laughter in the garden, the songs sung at dusk. You wonder what will survive and what will be lost. And yet, even in the midst of chaos, there is a strange kind of peace. You have lived through the unthinkable, you are still breathing, the island is wounded, but not dead. Somewhere, deep inside, a stubborn ember of hope refuses to be snuffed out. A Viking shoves you toward the shore, and you stumble, but you do not fall. You look back one last time, taking in the ruins, the smoke, the rising sun glinting on broken glass. Lindisfarne is changed, forever, and so are you. You are herded from the ruins with the other survivors, stumbling over stones and bodies, your wrists chafed raw from the rough rope binding them. The air is thick with smoke, each breath tasting of salt and cinders, every step haunted by the memory of what this place was, safe, orderly, sacred, only hours before. Around you the monks shuffle, heads bowed, some weeping quietly, others too numb for tears. Even Brother Cedric, whose jokes could weather anything, is silent now, his mouth drawn tight and his eyes dark with exhaustion. The Vikings are everywhere, their shouts echoing off the scorched stones. They move with purpose, searching for stragglers, overturning anything left unpillaged. A few strut like victorious crows, swinging silver goblets and taunting the captives with guttural snatches of song. You watch as one young raider pauses to inspect a shattered stained glass fragment, the jewel-like colours bright even amid the dirt. He pockets it with a satisfied grunt, one more trophy for the long journey home. You keep your head down. To look up is to invite notice, and notice is dangerous. At one point, a raider with plaited blonde hair grabs your shoulder and shoves you forward, muttering something sharp and unintelligible. You bite your lip and stumble on, clutching the remnants of your courage like a crumbling relic. A group of monks tries to slip away, edging toward the broken gate, but the Vikings spot them before they get far. You flinch as one is struck down, the others dragged back to the group, blood trailing in their wake. Fear knots your gut. You pray, not for rescue. Rescue feels impossible now, but for the strength to endure. The abbot is close by, his face bruised, one eye swelling shut. He moves among the survivors, murmuring words of comfort, straightening spines, squeezing trembling hands. "We are together," he whispers. "We are alive. They have not broken us." His voice is low, urgent, steady as bedrock, and for a moment you believe him. The monks press closer, finding what comfort they can in the old man's stubborn hope. You are pushed toward the church. The once magnificent nave is wrecked. Benches upended, altar stripped, fragments of scripture littering the floor like leaves after a storm. Sunlight slants through holes in the roof, illuminating dust motes and the pale, frightened faces of your brothers. The raiders corral you there, barking orders, dividing the group. Some monks are pulled aside, young, strong, or simply unlucky. The rest are forced to their knees. Your mind races with wild plans. You scan the faces of your friends, looking for any sign of resistance, but most are too stunned, too beaten to even think of escape. Even the bravest, like Brother Cedric and Brother Osric, seem cowed by the enormity of what has happened. You wonder if you'll ever see them again, or if the group is about to be torn apart for good. One of the Vikings, a man with a scarred face and ice-pale eyes, steps forward, holding a length of chain. He addresses the group in halting Latin, the words thick and strange but unmistakable. "Those who fight die, those who kneel live, maybe." He grins, revealing teeth filed to points. You shudder, ducking your head. They begin to tie men together, linking wrists with rope, threading chains through ankles. You are shackled to Brother Maurice, who squeezes your hand in wordless reassurance. The process is brutal. Anyone who resists is struck or dragged aside. You watch, helpless, as a novice who tries run is caught, beaten and left in the dust. The lesson is clear: obey or suffer. The abbot tries to negotiate, offering the remaining treasures for your freedom, but the Viking leader only laughs. "We have all we want," he says in his own tongue, then spits on the floor for emphasis. The monks lower their heads. Hope feels thinner with every passing minute. The raiders finish sorting the captives. Some are loaded with sacks of loot, forced to carry the spoils to the waiting longships. Others, less lucky, are simply thrown onto the sand, prodded with spear butts. You find yourself in the first group, staggering under the weight of a heavy chest filled with chalices and altar plate. Brother Cedric staggers beside you, grunting with each step. "If we survive this," he mutters, "I'm never volunteering for kitchen duty again." It's a feeble joke, but it helps. Outside, the Vikings are rounding up more survivors. Fishermen, stable hands, even a few local women caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The air buzzes with tension. You can smell the sea, sharp and cold, just beyond the dunes. They march you to the beach. The longships loom, beautiful and terrible, their carved prows snarling at the sky. You are forced into a huddle, waiting as the raiders load their loot. Around you, the cries of the wounded mingle with the caw of gulls. One monk begins to pray, his voice thin but unwavering, and others join in, the familiar words offering a shaky kind of shelter. You look up, squinting at the sky. Clouds race overhead, the promise of rain hanging in the air. For a moment, you think you see something. Figures on the far side of the causeway. Maybe soldiers, maybe just more villagers come to stare at the ruins. Hope flickers, then fades. The tide is high. No one can cross. Not now. You are alone. The Vikings return, hauling the last of the spoils. The leader barks orders, and the group begins to move, driving the prisoners toward the boats. You stumble over rocks and splinters, your bare feet bruised and bleeding. The sea rushes in, icy and indifferent, soaking the hem of your robe. You are lifted roughly unceremoniously into the belly of the nearest longship. The hull smells of tar and sweat, the planks sticky beneath your hands. You are shoved between two other monks, chained together like animals. A Viking guard settles nearby, eyeing you with a mixture of boredom and contempt. The ships fill quickly. Above the noise, you hear the leader's voice, chanting something rhythmic, and the oarsmen take up the beat. The boat shudders, then slides from the sand out into the restless tide. You twist around for one last look at Lindisfarne. The island is a smear of smoke and ruin, the monastery's spire snapped like a broken tooth. For a moment, a wild grief rises in you, sharper than any blow. You want to scream, to leap overboard, to swim for shore, but you know it's hopeless. As the boat pulls away, the monks around you huddle together, some weeping openly, others whispering prayers or simply staring into the distance. The wind is cold, but the sun is rising higher, gilding the waves with impossible beauty. You close your eyes, breathing slow, trying to remember the feel of soft grass underfoot, the taste of honey cake, the comfort of your narrow bed. Every memory is precious now. Time blurs. You don't know how long you drift, chained and aching, as the oars dip and rise, carrying you further from everything you've known. You hear the guards talk, laugh, trade stories, some in their own tongue, others in broken Latin, or the rough language of the coast. You realize, in a strange way, that they are not monsters, just men, hungry, ruthless, following the path that life has carved for them. At some point, a young Viking with sun-bleached hair offers you a cup of water. You gulp it greedily, grateful even for this small kindness. He shrugs, as if embarrassed to have shown mercy, and moves away. You think, not for the first time, how complicated the world can be. The day passes, the shore dwindles, then vanishes altogether. The sea is wide and empty, the sky enormous. You listen to the creak of wood, the sigh of oars, the quiet sobs of the men beside you. You wonder what will happen next, whether you will be sold, ransomed, or simply tossed aside. The uncertainty is a weight almost as heavy as the chains. But you are alive. Against all odds, you have survived. You whisper a prayer, not just for yourself, but for all those left to find. For Lindisfarne, for the world that has changed in a single terrible day. The longships row on, and you row with them, caught in the wake of history. The sun climbs, the wind freshens, and somewhere in the distance new shores wait indifferent and unknown. As the longships slip beyond the breakers, the cries and smoke of Lindisfarne melt into the pale sky, leaving you stranded in a silence almost as terrifying as the raid itself. The monks around you cling together, hands trembling, faces drawn and hollow-eyed. You squeeze Brother Maurice's shoulder, your chainmate, your lifeline for the moment. Feeling his shivers travel up your own arm. Across the deck, a Viking watches with the casual boredom of someone used to the aftermath of violence. His boots are caked in soot from your monastery's fires. The boat's rhythm is hypnotic, oars dipping, water slapping, the quiet groan of timbers. For a while, you are left to your thoughts. The ache in your wrists and the salt burn in your eyes. The only proof you are still real. Around you, the stolen treasures of Lindisfarne are piled in careless heaps. Chalices, crosses, gold filigree boxes, even the abbot's ancient staff. Its top still warm from the grip of desperate hands. The sight makes your stomach twist, a dull, helpless anger rising behind your teeth. A Viking woman, bare-armed and sharp-eyed, crouches to rummage through a sack of stolen goods, weighing the worth of each piece. You watch her set aside a small silver reliquary, shake her head at a tattered book of psalms, and tuck a handful of rings into her belt. It's surreal. The things you considered sacred reduced to so much loot. It almost makes you laugh, the absurdity of it. You suppose even saints end up melted down, eventually, if not by time, then by someone with an axe and an empty stomach. Beside you, Brother Cedric manages a thin, battered smile. "I always thought St. Cuthbert would protect us," he whispers, voice trembling. "Turns out he's better at finding lost keys than repelling raiders." You bark out a laugh, too tired to feel ashamed. Humor is all you have left. The ships pull together, rafted side by side, as the Vikings divvy up their spoils. Arguments break out. Who gets the gold chalice? Who takes the manuscript with the painted cover? Who claims the cloister's carved ivory comb? A fistfight nearly erupts over a jeweled cross until the leader, a man with weathered skin and braided beard, calls for silence, thumping his shield with the flat of his axe. The discipline is quick, brutal, and the point is made. Everything, including lives, is for the taking. You try not to look as the bodies of the slain monks are tossed overboard, weighted with stones. The Vikings perform this task with grim efficiency, crossing themselves as the corpses slide beneath the waves. You wonder, numbly, whether any prayer, Latin or Norse, can reach the souls who now drift in the dark sea. You find yourself whispering a psalm for them, voice too quiet for even the gulls to hear. At last, the ships turn north, sails unfurled to catch the sharp wind. The sun is high now, gilding the endless water and drawing sweat from your skin. The chains cut into your flesh with every lurch of the boat. "What now?" Brother Maurice asks, voice hoarse. You have no answer. The hours pass slowly, marked only by the changing angle of the light and the ache in your limbs. The Vikings relax, some eating cold fish, others dozing in the shade of their shields. A young raider barely older than you leans close, his English broken but eager. "You monk?" he asks, poking your robe. You nod, wary. He laughs. "Not much fighting, monk, but smart, maybe. Right. You write for me?" He draws a crude shape in the grime on the deck. Something that might be a rune or a rude joke. You manage a shaky smile, unsure whether he means to keep you alive or just amuse himself. Nearby, the Viking woman with the silver rings hands out cups of water to the captives. When she reaches you, she pauses. "You write?" she asks, echoing the boy. You nod. She grunts approval, pressing the cup into your hands. For a moment you glimpse something in her eyes, curiosity, maybe, or just calculation. "Vikings value gold, but words last," she mutters, half to herself. Brother Cedric leans in, hissing. "If we survive this, you can teach them Latin and get us better rations." The absurdity of it makes you snort, earning a glare from the nearest guard. You quiet yourself, clutching the water cup, grateful for even the smallest mercy. You try to keep track of the others, scanning the row of hunched monks and battered novices. Brother Osric is there, cradling a broken arm. The abbot sits apart, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. You wonder what he's asking for now. Strength, forgiveness, or just the chance to see the sun rise one more time. The ships begin to slow as they approach a rocky inlet, a place of temporary shelter, you guess, where the spoils can be sorted. Wounds tended, plans made, the raiders leap ashore, barking orders, herding you onto the stones. Your legs nearly buckle, unused to standing. The ground is sharp with shells and driftwood. Every step a fresh agony. The Vikings strip the captives of anything left, rings, belts, a hidden scrap of bread. They count heads, debate prices, argue over who gets first pick of the slaves. You are grouped by age and apparent usefulness. Those too old or too badly injured are shoved aside, left to huddle under the open sky. A few are struck when they falter, but mostly the mood is businesslike, the violence simmering just beneath the surface. You catch a glimpse of Brother Cedric, still trying to crack a joke with the nearest guard. If you want prayers for a good harvest, I'm your man. But the Viking just grunts and moves on. You envy Cedric's courage, even as you fear it will draw the wrong sort of attention. Food is distributed: tough bread, a little dried fish, a cup of weak ale. You chew slowly, each mouthful an act of defiance, proof that you are still alive, still yourself. You listen to the sea, to the low rumble of Norse voices, to the soft sobbing of the younger novices. Night falls, chill and merciless. You are herded into a rough ring, guards prowling the perimeter, their axes gleaming in the moonlight. The Vikings drink and boast by their fires, shadows leaping across their faces. You watch them, trying to read their moods, searching for any clue as to what comes next. The abbot gathers those within reach, urging quiet and patience. "We will endure," he murmurs. "This is not the end." His voice, even now, is steady, a rock in the chaos. Remember who you are. Remember Lindisfarne. Nothing they take can change that. You lie down, chained to Brother Maurice, the stones sharp against your back. You stare up at the stars, searching for the North Star, the only thing that hasn't changed. You wonder if anyone on the mainland is looking this way, if prayers are rising for you, if your story will ever be told. In the dark, you feel the fragile thread of hope, a stubborn refusal to let go. Even as a captive, even as your world lies in ruins, you are still here. You are still a voice, a witness, a keeper of story. Tomorrow will bring more pain, more fear, perhaps even death. But for now, under the silent watch of heaven, you let your breathing slow. The past is ashes, the future is uncertain, but the night at least is yours to endure. Dawn breaks thin and grey over the rocky Viking camp, a sullen hush hanging over both captors and captives. The North Sea wind is relentless, teasing the ashes from last night's fires and stinging your cheeks as you sit, chained among the others, trying to remember the shape of hope. Sleep had been a ragged, broken thing, each jolt of pain in your wrists or shoulder dragging you back to the cold reality of captivity. Still, morning means you have survived another night, and, in this new world, survival is its own quiet victory. The Vikings rise early. You watch them from the corner of your eye, the way they move, deliberate, unhurried, their camp routine as orderly as the prayers you once recited at dawn. Some tend to wounded comrades, binding gashes with strips torn from stolen altar linens. Others squat by the fire, gnawing bread and smoked fish, discussing their plans in a language thick with hard edges. A few glance at the monks the way a farmer might inspect a troublesome herd, weighing value, plotting use. Your group is split. The youngest and healthiest are chained together, corralled close to the shore. The older monks, the injured, those judged too frail to fetch a ransom or serve as slaves, are left huddled by the cliff, watched, but mostly ignored. The abbot, battered but unbowed, is among them, arms wrapped around a shivering novice. You catch his eye, and he nods, a silent benediction, or perhaps just a farewell. The day's first task is clear: move the loot. A Viking barks orders, and you, Brother Cedric, and half a dozen others are marched to the longships to haul the monastery's treasures ashore. You stagger under the weight of the silver, sweat freezing on your back. Cedric mutters under his breath, "If St. Cuthbert is watching, I hope he appreciates irony." You almost smile, but your lips are too numb. Once the loot is tallied, the real sorting begins. The Vikings gather the monks, inspecting you one by one as if selecting animals for market. Height, teeth, strength, each trait measured with calloused hands and quick, critical eyes. When a raider grips your jaw and turns your face this way and that, you flinch but force yourself to meet his gaze. He grunts, satisfied, and shoves you back into line. The fate of the captives becomes clear. Some are to be ransomed. Wealthy enough families or influential enough church connections might buy them back. Others, including you, are earmarked for slavery. The youngest novices cling to each other, eyes wide and terrified. Cedric, seeing your face, whispers, "Remember, we're not dead yet, And where there's life, there's hope, and also, unfortunately, porridge. You're divided into smaller groups. A few monks are handed over to different Viking chiefs as property, human coin in the great trading economy of the north. You watch as a novice named Wilfred is led away, tears tracking clean lines down his dirt-smudged cheeks. He looks back, searching for reassurance. You can only nod and try not to cry yourself. Around midday, a new group of Norsemen arrives, grizzled and scarred, their ship bristling with unfamiliar banners. They argue with your captors over the loot, the prisoners, even the very land beneath their feet. A fight breaks out, and you cower with the others as blows are traded and tempers flare. It's not just the English who suffer under the Viking yoke. These men are ruthless with each other too. Eventually, a crude agreement is reached, and a few prisoners are traded between clans like sacks of barley. Through it all, you are reminded how little your fate belongs to you now. Each decision is made above your head, in a language you barely understand, by men who see you as nothing but a body to be used or sold. The realization is suffocating. You hold tight to the thin comfort of Cedric's presence, and the even thinner memory of Lindisfarne's peaceful bells. In the afternoon, the Vikings' mood shifts. Their leaders gather, consulting over rough maps and pieces of jewelry, dividing the spoils, plotting courses homeward. The monks are ordered to help repack the treasures, the silver and gold bound tightly, the books and relics tossed carelessly into sacks. A Norse woman notices you cradling a battered psalter and hesitates for a moment before snatching it away. She studies the painted pages, brow furrowed, then tosses it into the heap. Beauty weighed against utility, art against appetite. You are given water, a crust of bread, your chains are checked, your hands inspected for wounds. Brother Cedric, refusing to let silence win, remarks, "At least their bread is less likely to break your teeth than the monasteries." Someone nearby chuckles, an unexpected, almost joyful sound in this grim new world. Toward evening, the Vikings begin to dismantle their camp. Fires are stamped out, gear is packed, and the ships are made ready. The monks are rounded up, forced to help push the heavy longships back into the surf. The work is grueling, your muscles screaming in protest. At one point you slip, falling hard on the rocks. A raider hauls you to your feet, his grip painful, but then surprisingly, he brushes the sand from your shoulder almost gently. He says something you don't understand, but the tone is not unkind. You realize, in a jolt, that even here, kindness and cruelty can exist side by side. Night falls as the longships are launched. The captives are loaded aboard, this time fewer in number. Some, you notice with a lump in your throat, have simply disappeared, left behind on the shore, or lost in the scuffle of the day. The loss is sharp, but there is no time to mourn. As you settle into the ship's hold, chained between Brother Cedric and another shivering monk, you look back at the cliffs. Lindisfarne is gone from view, lost in darkness and distance. The waves slap against the hull, and the boat rocks in the wind, carrying you toward a future as uncertain as the stars. Cedric sighs beside you. "Tomorrow, we start again," he says. "Wherever we are, whatever they call us." He offers you a lopsided grin. "Besides, I hear the Norse appreciate good singing. Maybe they'll let us start a choir." You laugh, a sound that feels almost normal. You realize that for now, you have survived chains and choices, and tomorrow will be another test. You hold on to that small, stubborn hope as the boat turns north and the cold wind rises. You are not broken, not yet. The night is long and restless, the sea rising and falling beneath the hull like the breath of some ancient sleeping giant. You drift in and out of uneasy dreams, memories of home tangled with visions of the raid, the clangor of battle echoing under the low star-pricked sky. Sometimes you think you hear singing, the low mournful chant of your brothers on the wind, or perhaps the deep rhythmic song of the oarsmen as they row into the darkness. For a while you almost believe the two melodies weave together, sorrow and survival braided as tightly as the ropes around your wrists. When you wake, it is to cold and hunger and the smell of salt and sweat. You are stiff, every joint protesting the night's cramped confinement. Brother Cedric is already awake, humming under his breath. "Morning, if you can call it that," he says, attempting a grin. You nod, not trusting your voice, and focus on the movement of the sea, the distant line of dawn bleeding pink and gold across the horizon. By mid-morning, the ships draw together, sails lowered, oars pulled in as the Vikings take a rest. The raiders lounge on the decks, sharing food, mending torn clothing, sharpening blades dulled by yesterday's violence. You notice how ordinary they look. Once the heat of battle has faded, men and women, young and old, rubbing sleep from their eyes, tending wounds, telling jokes in their sharp-edged tongue. There are no monsters here, just people shaped by a world of hunger, danger, and fierce loyalty. One of the younger Vikings, a boy barely older than the youngest novices, leans toward you, squinting curiously. He points to your robe, then to himself, then mimes writing in the air. You nod, understanding, and draw a cross with your bound hands. He grins, his teeth white and crooked, and pulls a bit of parchment from a pouch, along with a chunk of charcoal. Name? He asks in halting, careful English. You manage to scratch your name, a clumsy, cramped scrawl on the parchment, and he beams as if you've given him gold. He repeats your name back to you, then writes his own Bjorn. You exchange a look, two boys, two worlds, and a moment of something like peace in the midst of all this madness. The Vikings' leader calls for the captives to be brought forward. You and the others are herded to the bow, where you stand blinking in the pale sunlight. He looks each of you over, speaking with his lieutenants, making decisions with quick, efficient gestures. Some captives are separated, those who are sick or wounded from the rest. Brother Osric, limping badly, is led away with the older monks. Cedric squeezes your arm as he passes, murmuring, "Keep your head down and your heart up. We'll see each other again." You nod, feeling a lump form in your throat. The Vikings debate among themselves, pointing at you and a few others, arguing in low, urgent tones. You realize that you are being judged, not just as a captive, but as a potential asset. Can you read? Can you write? Do you have skills worth keeping alive? You stand as straight as the chains allow, trying to appear strong, capable. You hope it's enough. After a time, you are separated from Brother Cedric, chained instead to a broad-shouldered Viking woman with scars on her arms and an inscrutable expression. She looks down at you, then shrugs, as if to say, "This is just another day." You try to match her calm even as your heart hammers in your chest. The day stretches on. The ships travel north along a jagged, unfamiliar coastline, the air growing colder, the wind sharper. You catch glimpses of other settlements, tiny fishing villages, smoke rising from huts tucked among the rocks. Some inhabitants wave at the ships, others hide, crossing themselves as if to ward off evil. You wonder if news of Lindisfarne's fate will reach them, if anyone will come to your aid, or if your story will end here, a footnote in the sagas told by the fire. As afternoon wanes, you are brought above deck and given a meager meal. Stale bread, a handful of dried fish, a cup of brackish water. You eat in silence, mindful of the guards watching every move. The Viking woman beside you tears her bread in half and hands a piece to you. "For luck," she says in accented English, her voice surprisingly gentle. You murmur thanks and savor the rare taste of kindness. Later, as the sun begins to dip, the Vikings begin to sing, deep booming songs that roll across the water, weaving tales of gods and heroes, storms and homecomings. You listen, spellbound, even as your heart aches for your own lost community and its gentler music. One of the songs tells of a warrior who sailed beyond the end of the world, seeking a land where pain and sorrow cannot follow. For a moment, you imagine yourself in that story, floating free of chains and memory, the past washed away by the tide. The journey is slow. Sometimes the ships anchor in quiet coves to rest. Sometimes they push through choppy waters, the oars biting deep. At night, you huddle with the other captives, sharing what warmth and comfort you can. Brother Maurice, ever the scholar, murmurs bits of scripture to himself. A novice named John clings to a scrap of cloth, his only reminder of home. You whisper stories when you can, old tales of saints and miracles, anything to keep the fear at bay. You notice that not all the Vikings are cruel. Some are indifferent, treating the captives like livestock, but a few offer scraps of food, a blanket, a word of reassurance. The woman chained to you, whose name you learn is Astrid, teaches you a few words in Norse. Sky, she says, pointing upward. Himmel, you repeat it, stumbling, and she laughs, a sound as rough and honest as wind through grass. One evening, as the ships shelter in a sheltered bay, the Vikings hold a feast. Fires flicker along the shore, shadows leaping and dancing. You and the other captives are kept apart, watched carefully, but the music and laughter carry across the sand. Astrid slips you a piece of roasted fish. Not poison, she jokes, nudging you when you hesitate. Eat. Tomorrow maybe you sing for us, yes? You smile, surprised at yourself, and nod. For the first time since the raid, you find yourself wondering about these people, their lives, their fears, their reasons for coming so far from home. You remember the way they moved through Lindisfarne, hungry and desperate, and realize that your own world had never seemed so small, so fragile, as it does now. The wind howls outside your shelter, but within the circle of captives, there is a strange, fierce camaraderie. You share food, memories, hopes for rescue. You tell each other who you are, what you loved most about the monastery. Brother Cedric's jokes, the taste of honey cake, the hush of dawn prayers in the old stone chapel. These memories become your talismans, the treasures you carry when everything else is lost. As the feast winds down and the Vikings grow quiet, you lie awake beneath the stars, thinking of home, of loss, of the strange new world you now inhabit. You whisper a prayer for all those you have lost, and for those who remain. You hope that somewhere, someone is remembering you, too. Sleep finally comes, not the dreamless oblivion you crave, but a softer, more merciful kind, one that lets you drift on the sound of the sea and the memory of voices you once knew. Tomorrow, you know, will bring new challenges, but tonight, at least you have found a fragile peace, woven from kindness, endurance, and the knowledge that even here, in the wake of ruin, your story is not yet done. The days and nights blur into each other as the longships thread their way up the unfamiliar coast. Every hour is filled with the slow ache of loss and the nervous anticipation of what lies ahead. You and your fellow monks learn quickly how to endure, when to bow your heads, when to meet a Viking's eyes with calm, and when to offer a joke or a story if it earns a little mercy or extra bread. You survive, one moment at a time, in a world entirely unlike the one you left behind. Eventually, the ships reach a wide river mouth shrouded in early morning mist. The sun is little more than a pale disk behind heavy clouds. As the fleet turns inland, you are herded ashore with the other captives, stumbling onto mud flats, your legs stiff from days at sea. All around, the Vikings move with the confidence of men returning home, shouting greetings to the settlement sentries, shouldering sacks of loot as though carrying nothing more than firewood. To you, their village is a strange new world, houses of turf and timber, livestock penned beneath low roofs, children peeking from behind rough doors. You and the other monks are forced to kneel in the center of the settlement, heads bowed, as the raiders display their spoils. The local chieftain, a man with iron grey hair and a voice like a growl, comes to inspect both treasure and prisoners. He questions your captors in rapid Norse, his gaze flicking from gold to faces and back again, weighing value in everything. A deal is struck. Some monks, those with fine robes or educated looks, are separated out, likely to be ransomed. Others, yourself among them, are distributed as slaves, gifts or bargaining chips. You find yourself claimed by Astrid, the scarred woman who'd shared bread and language with you. She leads you, not unkindly, to a small smoky house near the edge of the village. Inside, you are set to work, carrying water, grinding grain, mending nets, anything that needs doing. The work is hard, but you welcome it. Every small task gives shape to the endless, formless hours. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and Astrid's children are asleep, she sits across from you by the hearth and asks questions. What do monks do all day, she wonders, wrinkling her nose at your tales of prayer and fasting. We fight and farm and fish. Your way is quieter. You tell her stories of Lindisfarne, of St. Cuthbert, of the gentle cadence of monastic life. She listens, sometimes scoffing, sometimes thoughtful. You miss your brothers fiercely. Now and then you glimpse one across the village, hauling wood or tending sheep, but there is never a chance for more than a brief nod, a whispered blessing. Brother Cedric, you learn, has been sent up a river with another family. Brother Maurice works in the chieftain's hall, copying runes and teaching Latin to curious children. The abbot is gone, rumoured to have been ransomed or perhaps simply disappeared. Each loss stings. A fresh wound layered atop the old. Grief settles heavily over the village, too, not just among the monks but in the homes of the Norse as well. Not every raider returned from Lindisfarne. Some families mourn, others celebrate. Life is complicated here, just as it was at home. You come to see the Vikings not as devils but as people, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, always struggling, always surviving. News of Lindisfarne's fall travels faster than you'd imagine. Traders bring word from the south, the story of the burning, the slaughter, the treasure carried off. Some boast of the riches and glory, others shake their heads in fear, whispering of curses and the wrath of foreign kings. The world, you realize, is watching, and every tale is taller than the last. One afternoon, Astrid comes to you, a strange look on her face. A priest has come from the trading post, she says. He wants to see the men who survived Lindisfarne. You are summoned to the hall, where the foreign priest, French by his accent, asks questions about the attack, about what was lost, about what the monks of England might do now. You answer as best you can, your voice shaking only a little. The priest takes notes, eyes sharp, already shaping your story into something that will travel even farther. Sometimes at night, you remember those who didn't survive. Brother Osric, who tried to save a wounded novice. The abbot, last seen blessing his flock. The women and children of the village. Caught in the chaos, you light a candle by Astrid's hearth and whisper a prayer, trusting that some part of Lindisfarne still lives wherever you do. You are given small freedoms. Your work earns trust. Astrid's children teach you Norse words, and you teach them Latin ones in return. The youngest, Frey, is fascinated by your tales of the saints, especially the ones with miracles and monsters. He sits on your knee and begs for stories every evening, and you find comfort in the rhythm of telling, in the fragile but persistent bond of new beginnings. Seasons change. Winter bites hard, and you huddle by the fire, trading warmth for silence. The Norse believe in their own gods, but now and then, Astrid joins you in prayer, asking your god for an easy landing or a gentle spring. You realize, almost in spite of yourself, that kindness and faith can grow even in stony soil. With the thaw comes news from the wider world. Christian merchants arrive from Francia, bearing rumours of armies mustering, of kings furious at the attack. Some say Lindisfarne's relics have been recovered, smuggled south by survivors. Others claim the island is haunted, cursed by blood and ash. Every tale makes the villagers uneasy, and you notice Astrid and her neighbours watching the horizon more carefully, as if expecting another fleet to appear at any moment. As the first flowers open and the river thaws, you stand by the water's edge, remembering the peace of home, the music of bells, the laughter in the cloister garden. You realize that for all you have lost, you are still here, scarred but unbroken, carrying Lindisfarne's story forward in a place that once seemed unimaginable. Grief lingers, but it softens. The wounds of Lindisfarne become part of you, not chains, but scars that mark your survival. Hope flickers. You begin to think, just maybe, of a future one shaped not by fear, but by the stubborn, resilient heart of those who refuse to be forgotten. Time passes, enough for your wounds to heal into scars, for your hair to grow longer, and your shoulders a little stronger from the endless work. The village, once a prison, becomes a strange kind of home. You settle into the rhythms of Viking life, the early mornings, the shivering splash of river water as you wash the night from your eyes, the blunt bread and dried fish for breakfast, the rough laughter as the Norsemen begin their day, and all the while, the memory of Lindisfarne burns inside you. Sometimes as a wound, sometimes as a lamp you carry through each task, each moment. But even in this remote settlement at the edge of the world, you can't escape the growing shadow cast by the raid. News travels faster than any ship. News of Lindisfarne's fall, news of fire and slaughter, news that shivers through Europe like a chill wind. Traders arrive from the south, bringing not just cloth and wine, but stories. Kings in distant courts are furious. Bishops thunder from their pulpits. Peasants whisper that the end of days must be at hand. Some say the monastery's treasures have been melted down. others that holy relics are hidden in secret, and a few even claim that the sea itself has turned against the Northmen, cursing them for their sacrilege. You notice how these stories ripple outward, changing with every telling. In the Frankish trading post a week's walk upriver, the tale is already legend. Vikings with dragon-proud ships, descending from the storm, their axes thirsting for blood, their hearts untouched by mercy. In the halls of Northumbria, rumour grows ever stranger. Some claim the monks of Lindisfarne rose from the dead to chase the raiders into the surf. Others that the ground itself opened up to swallow the invaders whole. You hear these things repeated in Astrid's house, by the fire, and outside at the market, where Norse and Saxon faces alike go pale at the mention of Lindisfarne. One cold morning, a group of foreign priests arrives in the village. They come not as enemies, but as messengers, bearing letters stamped with wax and threats in elegant Latin. Their leader, a gaunt man named Father Hugh, demands an audience with the chieftain. He speaks for the Bishop of York, he claims, and his message is simple. What happened at Lindisfarne will not be forgotten. There will be retribution divine and earthly. The Norse listen, some smirking, others visibly uneasy. Afterward, Father Hugh seeks out the monks among the captives. He listens to your account with grim intensity, asking for every detail: who survived, what was lost, what relics might still remain. You try to answer as best you can, struggling with the memories, faces, names, prayers, half remembered in the blur of fire and fear. He thanks you, offers a prayer in return, and tells you your story will travel farther than you can imagine. What happened on that island is already changing the world. You realize he's right. In every whispered tale and outraged sermon, Lindisfarne's tragedy is becoming something more. A warning, a rallying cry, a touchstone for faith and fear. Merchants bring word of new defences rising along every coast. Towers built, militias trained, holy relics hidden away. On the mainland, peasants look at every unfamiliar ship with terror. In courts, kings consult their councils, debating alliances, new taxes, stronger armies. The attack has jolted a continent awake, and the Vikings themselves feel the tremors. The village elders grow cautious. Raids are planned with more care, and you sense the pride of Lindisfarne's plunder now carries a hidden weight. Fear of vengeance, fear of the gods, fear of what they have set in motion. Astrid's eldest son, Bjorn, asks you quietly one night, "Will your God punish us? Will your king come?" You don't have easy answers. You only know that no one, not even the victors, will be untouched by what was done. Still, life must go on. You work the fields, tend the nets, barter for scraps at the market. You help Astrid's children with their lessons, telling stories of saints and riddles of the Gospels. Careful not to overstep, you write letters for the villagers, some to loved ones, some to far-off merchants. Your careful script a thin thread connecting worlds that might otherwise never meet. But sometimes, in the deep hours of night, you let yourself imagine the ripples spreading. You picture the abbots and bishops of England, gathering in secret, clutching at maps and tallying what was lost. You imagine kings, furious and frightened, swearing never to be caught off guard again. You picture young monks, staring at the scars on their hands, whispering the names of the fallen as they copy out the Book of Psalms. And you know the world is changing, minute by minute, far beyond your reach. You hear stories from the south, how the people of Northumbria now walk with heads bowed, how travellers avoid the coast at night, how prayers for deliverance echo louder than ever before. A merchant's wife, hear your accent, asks in awe if you really saw the dragon ships, if you truly survived the burning of the Holy Island. You nod, though the words stick in your throat. Sometimes you feel less like a survivor and more like a ghost, a vessel for stories not quite belonging anywhere. Winter comes, harsh and unyielding, but the Norse endure, and so do you. At Yule, Astrid insists you share your own customs. You teach her children the Latin prayer for peace, and in exchange they teach you the old songs of Odin and Thor. The village is a patchwork of old and new, sorrow and laughter stitched together by the daily work of survival. One night, as snow falls thick and quiet outside, you sit by the hearth with Astrid. She asks you about Lindisfarne again, her questions softer now. You tell her what you remember, the golden silence at dusk, the slow glow of candles, the sense that the world, just for a heartbeat, was safe and whole. She nods, her own eyes shining with memories of lost places. Maybe, she says, if we tell the story enough, it will matter. Maybe it will keep us safe. You hold on to that thought as the world outside grows colder, knowing that your words, like the ripples from that single raid, will keep moving outward, shaping the future in ways you can't yet see. Lindisfarne's fall is no longer just your pain, your loss. It is the world, and somehow that makes it bearable. You find a kind of hope in this frail, flickering but real. The story is not over, not for you, not for Lindisfarne, not for the world remade by the news spreading like wildfire through the night. Spring returns, slow and tentative, like a wary animal testing the edges of a clearing after the storm. In the Norse village, the snow finally melts, and the river runs full and cold again. You can smell earth for the first time in months, a sharp living scent that makes your chest ache for home. The children laugh louder, chasing each other among budding reeds. Men fix nets and carve new planks for boats battered by winter gales. Each small act of rebuilding feels in its own quiet way, like defiance against the dark that swept over Lindisfarne and everything that followed. You settle deeper into the fabric of this place. Your Norse improves, stilted and slow, but enough for barter and jest. In return, you teach Astrid's children their letters, scratching the Latin alphabet in mud with a stick, watching their small faces squint in concentration and then brighten as words take shape. For a few moments, you even forget you are a captive. You are simply a teacher, and the world is not made only of loss. One day, Astrid presses a battered relic into your hands, a small bronze cross, dented but unmistakable. Found it in the last ship's hall, she says, not meeting your eyes. Maybe you should have it. You close your fist around it, the metal warm from her palm. It is nothing like the treasures of Lindisfarne, but it is something, a piece of your old world survived. You wear it under your tunic, a secret only you and Astrid share. Still, the pain lingers. Sometimes you dream of the monastery as it was before, golden in evening light, the voices of your brothers rising in chant, the slow certainty that tomorrow would always be the same as today. In those dreams you walk the cloisters with Cedric, laugh with brother Maurice, feel the abbot's hand on your shoulder. Waking is the hardest part, remembering that Lindisfarne is ashen memory, that Cedric and Maurice are scattered to distant farms or dead, and that you may never return. But you do not let despair rot you from within. The monks who survived, those few you glimpse in passing at the river or marketplace, share your stubbornness. You nod across the crowds, whisper prayers when you dare, pass news in the smallest ways. Brother Cedric still lives, you hear. He tends the goats on the northern bluff. Brother Maurice writes letters for the Jarl's wife. He says you would laugh at the state of her Latin. These small scraps of news are your life raft. As the days grow longer, rumours trickle in from every traveller and trader. Some say the King of Northumbria has ordered new churches to be built, that every monk who survived is to be ransomed and returned. Others claim the Vikings are planning new raids, their greed sharpened by Lindisfarne's gold. There are tales of new walls rising along the coasts, of villagers learning to fight, of priests carrying swords hidden under their robes. Even the Norse are uneasy. You overhear their chiefs debating whether to strike south again or to bide their time, fearing English vengeance and Frankish fleets. One dusk, a stranger arrives at Astrid's house, a thin man in clerical black, his accent Saxon, his hair cropped short. He bows low to you, introduces himself as Brother Gamel from York. The church remembers its own, he whispers. We are gathering the living. You will come home, if you wish it. Hope burns so sudden and sharp that you have to grip the table to steady yourself. Astrid overhears and says nothing, but that night, after the children are asleep, she sits beside you at the fire. Will you go? She asks, voice tight as a drawn bowstring. You study her face, lined by hardship and kindness. I must, you say, but gently. I carry too many ghosts here, she nods. Take our prayers with you then, and tell your people that not all Norse are monsters. The weeks blur in a swirl of preparation. The Norse are nervous, the English wary. When the time comes, you gather at the river's edge with a handful of monks, and Saxon villagers, taken captive in other raids. Astrid presses the cross into your palm again, and you press it back. For Frey, you say, naming her youngest son. When he learns his letters, she smiles, her eyes bright with unshed tears. The journey home is slow, tense and uncertain. You are ferried by traders, passed from village to market to abbey, sometimes watched, sometimes welcomed. Along the way, you find Brother Maurice, gaunt but alive, his Latin now flavoured with Norse curses. Together, you reach the churchman in York, where your name is recorded, your wounds tended, your soul carefully inspected for scars and sins. York is a city alive with rumours. Everywhere, people speak of Lindisfarne, how the raid changed everything, how churches now keep guards at their doors, how the king's men are building watchtowers from Humber to Tyne. You meet others who survived, fishermen, scribes, a handful of novices grown thin and wary. Each has their story, each carries the memory of loss and survival. You share yours too, careful not to linger on the worst parts, careful to honour the dead with truth but not with despair. You are asked to speak before the bishop, and though your voice shakes, you tell what you remember. The hush before dawn, the terror and smoke, the small acts of courage that went unseen. The bishop listens, grave and quiet. The world is changed, he says at last. We must be as well. Days pass, then weeks. You are offered a place in York's great minster, a bed, warm food, the chance to teach the next generation of monks. At first, you want only to return to Lindisfarne, to touch the stones and stand once more where your old life began. But you learn, with a slow, aching certainty, that home is now a story you carry, not a place you can go. The island is being rebuilt. New walls, new altars, new prayers for safety. But you are changed, and so is everyone who survived. One evening, as you walk the cloisters of York, Brother Maurice appears at your side. They say the Vikings are building towns now, not just burning them, he muses. We will have to learn to live with them. You nod. We already have. You remember Astrid, her children, the bitter winter shared by the fire, the lessons traded across languages and faiths. You realize, slowly, that every scar, every memory, bitter or sweet, has become a part of you, a stitch in the tapestry of a world remade by loss and stubborn hope. In your prayers, you ask for peace, not vengeance, for memory, not only for forgetting. You pray for Astrid and her family, for Brother Cedric tending his goats, for the souls of the dead, for the quiet gold light of Lindisfarne, now a legend drifting through the hearts of strangers. And as spring turns to summer, you begin to believe that perhaps one day the world will heal. The world after Lindisfarne is not the world you left behind. As the seasons shift and word spreads of the monastery's fall, you sense a subtle but unstoppable change threading through every corner of Britain and far beyond. It begins quietly, a sense of unease on the roads, a tightening of security in every coastal village, old watchtowers suddenly manned day and night. You feel it in York, where you now live, a city swollen with fear, hope and new arrivals, all of them wondering what the future will hold. But the ripples don't stop in York. Across the seas and throughout Europe, news of the Viking raid crackles like a spark in dry grass. The sack of Lindisfarne, you soon learn, is no isolated tragedy. It is the opening salvo of what will become the Viking Age, a period that will stretch for centuries and reach every edge of Christendom. That is the mainstream fact whispered and shouted everywhere now. The Lindisfarne raid in 1793 is remembered as the event that marked the true beginning of the Viking Age. You hear this in sermons, in the warnings of merchants, in the quiet talk of rulers. The old world ended with Lindisfarne, a Frankish priest says, voice tight as he blesses his journey home. Now the sea brings monsters, not miracles. Monasteries from Ireland to Italy strengthen their walls, bury their treasures, and rewrite their prayers to ask not just for rain and harvest, but for mercy from the Northmen. In the cathedral, you help copy letters sent from Rome, from Aachen, from the courts of kings who have never seen the North Sea, but now dream of it in their nightmares. You translate edicts, pen warnings, and see the shape of the new world in the ink that stains your fingers. News arrives daily of other attacks. Jarrow, Iona, the wild coast of Frisia, all struck by those same dragon-proud ships. Each story is different, but the terror is the same. Even the brave whisper that God's own houses are no longer safe. York becomes a hub for refugees. Monks fleeing ruined abbeys, artisans hoping to ply their trades somewhere far from the smoke of burning towns. You meet a mason from the east who shows you how to build walls with thicker stones, how to set fire beacons on the cliffs so that no ship can approach unnoticed. We never used to fear the sea, he tells you, but now even the fishermen look over their shoulders. Yet, for every new precaution, there is also resilience. The church rallies, bishops send funds to rebuild what was lost, not only in Lindisfarne but everywhere the Vikings' shadow falls. You are asked to teach young scribes how to make secret hiding places for relics, how to bind books with iron clasps so that fire and water will not destroy them as easily. The Abbot of York tells you, what can be burned can also be rebuilt. What is lost can be written again. The king's men arrive more often now. Riders in chainmail bearing banners marked with strange new sigils. You watch as they drill the townsfolk in the use of spear and shield. At first it's awkward, almost comical, farmers tripping over their own feet, bakers complaining about blisters, but you see determination hardening them too. The spirit of Lindisfarne, the stubborn belief that faith and work are worth defending, spreads from village to village. One day, as you sit in the scriptorium, a messenger brings you news. Brother Cedric is alive. He has been ransomed, and now tends a small chapel on the coast, stubbornly planting beans and hope in soil still blackened by fire. You travel to visit him, crossing fields of waving grass, your feet eager and your heart hammering with both joy and dread. When you reach his chapel, you find him kneeling in the garden, face thinner, hair flecked with grey, but the same sparkle in his eyes. He grins when he sees you. You again. I thought I'd finally escaped your terrible Latin jokes. You laugh, and for a moment, you were both simply men, no longer monk and survivor, just friends. Cedric pours you weak ale and listens to the news from York. He tells you about his congregation, mostly fishermen and widows, all frightened but stubborn. They've built a palisade, he says, and I think it might actually work. He winks. Or at least it gives the goats something to chew on. Together, you walk to the water's edge, watching the tide roll in and out. Always hungry, always returning. You talk of the future, not only of raids and rebuilding, but of how faith might change. We always thought the saints would protect us, Cedric says quietly. Maybe now, we must learn to protect ourselves and each other too. You nod, feeling the truth of it settle in your bones. Back in York, the city is alive with new purpose. The bishop calls a gathering of survivors from every abbey that has felt the Vikings' wrath. You sit in the great hall, the air thick with incense and resolve. Men and women from across the north share their stories, some full of grief, others fierce with defiance. Together you draft new rules for how to survive. Store grain in hidden places, build booklet towers, train even the novices to fight if they must. For the first time you feel the tide is turning, not against the Northmen, but against despair. Still, there are moments of deep sorrow. The names of the dead are read aloud, their memory honoured with the lighting of candles and the singing of psalms. You add your own prayers for those you lost, brother. Maurice, whose fate remains uncertain. Astrid and her children, whose kindness you can only repay with remembrance. The abbot, who vanished into legend as quietly as he lived. The wounds are slow to heal, but healing comes, bit by bit, as summer burns bright. You visit Lindisfarne once more. The island is changed, scarred by fire and neglect, but already you see the signs of new life. Green shoots force their way through blackened earth. A handful of novices sweep the ruined cloisters, stacking stones for a new wall. You walk among them offering advice, sharing stories, teaching what you have learned about survival and hope. In the church's shattered nave, someone has left a single battered candle, its flame flickering bravely in the wind. You kneel beside it, head bowed, and offer thanks. The world has changed. So have you. The story of Lindisfarne is not only one of loss, but of the quiet, stubborn courage that comes after. the kind that builds walls, writes new books, and lights candles in the ruins. It is the beginning of something, not only the end, and as you return to York, the sky streaked with the pink and gold of dusk, you realise that Lindisfarne's legacy is everywhere, in the faces of the children, learning their letters, in the clang of hammers as new towers rise, in the prayers whispered by those who refuse to forget. The Viking Age has begun, but so is an age of resilience, of memory, of slow but unyielding faith. History doesn't always move with the thunder of armies, or the fall of kingdoms. Sometimes it shifts with the shock of a single day, a single island, a single spark. Years pass, and you feel the tremor of Lindisfarne echo down the generations, shaping lives far beyond your own. The world remembers in whispers and songs what happened that morning when the tide brought strangers to a holy shore. In York, you find yourself part of a quiet revolution. The church, once content in its seclusion, is now forced to rethink its place in the world. The bishops consult with warriors and merchants, forming alliances that would have been unthinkable before the raid. You sit in candlelit chambers, translating letters for priests and lords, and realize that your knowledge has become a form of armor, a weapon against the chaos beyond the walls. The story of Lindisfarne becomes a lesson, repeated in sermons and market gossip. You hear it told by fishermen on the wharves, and by children skipping stones on the Ouse, how monks prayed as fire swept the altar, how the dragon ships came and left the world forever altered. Some tales grow wild in the telling, ghosts rising from the sea, saints striking down invaders with lightning. But beneath the embroidery is the truth. The world is no longer safe, and no one is truly isolated anymore. There's a strange comfort in this shared vulnerability. The raid has done what centuries of preaching could not. It has bound communities together. No longer do abbeys stand alone, hoping for divine intervention. Now they build alliances, raise militias, share warnings. You see it everywhere. Villagers carrying spears as they walk to market, nuns training with bows behind convent walls, even travelling merchants pledging mutual defence against the next ship that crests the horizon. As the years roll by, you return often to Lindisfarne, each visit a kind of pilgrimage. The scars are visible, blackened timbers, toppled stones, fields still marked by the flames. But so is the resilience. New saplings sprout among the ruins. The bell is recast and hung again, and voices rise in song each evening, soft but stubborn. Each time, you kneel in the rebuilt chapel and feel the hum of all who have come before and after, each carrying a piece of the island's story within them. You keep in touch with Brother Cedric, whose letters arrive, ink-smudged and full of cheerful complaints. "The goats still have more sense than most of my parishioners," he writes. "But at least neither of them bite." He visits when he can, and together you walk the cliff paths, recalling both the terror and the absurdities, the onions trampled underfoot, the honey cakes burned to charcoal, the stubborn refusal to let despair win. In those moments, laughter is its own rebellion. Outside the church, the world is shifting in ways no one could have predicted. The king's men grow more organised. Fortresses rise along every coast. The next Viking raid, because there is always a next, finds stiffer resistance, better prepared defenders. Some attackers die on the sand, others retreat, taking only stories with them. The fear remains, but it is tempered now by readiness. You help train the novices in more than prayers. You teach them to read the weather, to keep a sharp lookout, to hide their treasures where fire and steel cannot reach. The monasteries, once scattered like islands themselves, now share messages in secret. Relics are moved from place to place, protected by circuits of trusted friends and strangers bound by common cause. You help organize these networks, amazed at how quickly even the most reserved abbots learn to barter, bluff and strategize. In your heart, you know this is not how things used to be, but you also know that survival of faith, of memory, of people themselves, means adaptation. Through all of this, the memory of Lindisfarne remains a touchstone. You see it in the faces of young scribes who copy the Gospels late into the night, their ink-smeared fingers trembling not from fear, but from the responsibility of keeping a story alive. You see it in the farmers who repair the seawalls each spring, their hands rough with work and hope. You see it even in the raiders themselves, some returning older, looking for trade not plunder, their eyes wary but not without regret. Occasionally, you hear news from across the sea. Settlements of Norsemen in Ireland, strange alliances forged with local lords, new faiths sprouting up beside the old. Once a merchant arrives in York with a gift, a fragment of a Lindisfarne gospel, miraculously recovered from the market of a distant fjord. The monks weep as they touch the pages, and you realize that no act of violence, no matter how thorough, can erase everything. You become a teller of tales. In crowded halls and quiet chapels, you share what you remember, not only the horrors, but the moments of kindness, the jokes that made terror bearable, the lessons learned in fire and loss. You remind your listeners that history is not only what is done to us, but what we choose to do after. Lindisfarne changed the world, you say, but so did those who rebuilt it. As the decades unfold, you watch children grow into leaders, villages grow into towns, and the first shaky alliances between Norse and English become something that looks a little like peace. You see Astrid's son, Frey, arrive in York with a trader's caravan, speaking both tongues, wearing your battered bronze cross. He finds you after a church service, grinning, and says, "My mother told me to thank you for stories, for hope." You embrace him, not quite able to speak. You come to understand that the true legacy of Lindisfarne is not only fear or grief, but connection. It is the reason monks now travel in pairs, the reason every village child learns to spot a ship on the horizon, the reason stories, your story, are passed from mouth to mouth, growing, changing, surviving. And so, year after year, you keep the memory alive, lighting candles for the dead and the living, for Lindisfarne and all the worlds it touched. You teach your pupils to remember not only what was lost, but what endured, the stubborn love of community, the power of words, and the resilience that blooms in the cracks of history. You are part of that legacy now, and as the shadows lengthen and your hair grows silver, you whisper one last prayer for the island, for the world, and for those who will tell this story when you are gone. In the end, you realize every age is born from the ruins of the last, and every heart in its own way is a monastery rebuilt. Even now, so many years later, the memory of Lindisfarne clings to you, gentle and jagged, sacred and ruined. You carry it everywhere, in the set of your shoulders as you walk the bustling streets of York, in the way you pause to listen for distant bells, in the quiet hush you still feel just before sleep. There are days when you wake convinced the world is unchanged, only to be startled anew by the way it has grown unfamiliar, richer and stranger with every passing year. You are old now, or so your bones keep insisting. The world around you pulses with life and movement. York is a patchwork of tongues and faces, a place where English, Norse and Frankish merchants barter side by side beneath the shadow of the minster. You see women in veils kneeling at church beside traders in furs. You hear children recite prayers in languages that would have seemed sorcery to your younger self. Change has not only come, it has settled in for good. Sometimes you wander the city at dusk, watching lamplight flicker in the windows, listening to the songs that drift up from the taverns and marketplaces. Here and there you catch scraps of the story that has become your life's companion. They say the Northmen once burned a holy island, and the world was never the same. There are those who repeat the tale with awe, others with shivers, but always with the sense that something in it touches everyone. You find yourself both proud and weary to be its keeper. You teach in the cathedral now, your days shaped by the rhythm of bells and lessons. The young monks gather around you, eyes wide, some eager for heroics, some simply grateful for stories on cold evenings. You tell them what you remember, about the peace before, the thunder of the raid, the years of rebuilding. You are careful to tell the truth, but never to let it harden into bitterness. Suffering is a teacher. You remind them gently, but so is hope, and so is laughter, even in the dark. Sometimes you catch them whispering your words to each other in the refectory, and you smile. The story is safe. Letters arrive from all over the north, asking for news, for guidance, for reassurance that what was lost can be rebuilt. You write back as best you can, your hand less steady, your words chosen more slowly. You hear from Brother Cedric, whose parish has become a sanctuary for orphans and wanderers. There are more goats than sense here, he complains, but the children are learning both prayers and patience. Astrid's son, Frey, writes as well, new towns where Norse and English share markets and feasts, and where his mother's memory is honored in both songs and stories. She said you would understand, he adds. You do. Every year, on the anniversary of the raid, you light a candle for Lindisfarne. At first, the ritual is private, a trembling hand shielding flame from drafts. As time passes, others join you. Novices who never saw the island, townsfolk who only know the legend. The gathering grows, a living memory, a reminder that the wound has become a scar, and the scar has become a story everyone carries. There are nights when you dream of the old monastery, not as it was at the end, but as it existed in the golden silence before dawn. The hush of prayer, the feel of ink on parchment, the scent of honey and wax, the knowledge that for one perfect moment, everything fit together. You wake with tears on your cheeks, but also with gratitude. To have lived through so much is to become a witness, not only to the pain but to the healing. As you grow slower, you notice how the world keeps pressing forward. The threat of raiders lingers, but the fear is softer now, woven into the background like a minor key in a favorite hymn. New monasteries are built, sturdier and more wary, their bells ringing defiantly out over the waves. The children you taught now teach others. Your students copy the Gospels with careful hands, hiding wisdom in margins, building secret histories that will outlast even the next disaster. One autumn, you are invited back to Lindisfarne itself. The crossing is slow and difficult. Your steps are unsure, and the wind bites sharper than before, but you press on, drawn by the promise of home. The island has changed. Where blackened stones once lay scattered, there are now gardens and fresh walls, laughter echoing in the cloisters, voices raised not in panic, but in song. You kneel in the rebuilt chapel and touch the altar, the cold stone warming beneath your hand. You whisper a prayer, not for what was lost, but for what has been made anew. You stand on the edge of the island as night falls, the waves silver in the moonlight, the sky ablaze with stars, the air is thick with salt and memory. You listen for the old peace, and to your surprise you find it waiting for you, not untouched, but transformed by everything that's happened. You realize you are both an end and a beginning, a living bridge between the Lindisfarne that was and the Lindisfarne that will be. In these last quiet years, you come to see that the meaning of the past is not found only in pain, but in the tenderness that comes after, the kindness you share, the lessons you pass on, the hope that grows when you choose not to forget. You are just one voice, one thread in the vast tapestry of memory. But that is enough. So you breathe deep, letting the weight finally slip from your shoulders. You give thanks for all you have lost and all you have found, and as the candles burn low and the hush of night gathers close, you let yourself drift back into the slow unraveling of the past, certain that your story will be carried forward, whispered from one generation to the next. Now the night is deep, and the candle burns low, shadows reaching softly across the floor. You rest in the gentle hush that lingers after so much storm, feeling the world's weight lift bit by bit, worry by worry. Listen, for a moment, to the peace that settles over Lindisfarne at last. The slow wash of waves, the call of a distant night bird, the hush of footsteps in a garden reborn. Breathe deep, letting each breath soothe the ache you carry, letting every memory soften into something almost sweet. You are safe here. You have survived the fires and the flood, the loss and the longing. You have found kindness in unlikely places and hope in the small acts of rebuilding. Even in the heart of ruin, you have watched seeds take root, patience, courage, forgiveness, growing quietly where no one thought life could return. Your story is not just one of what was broken, but what has healed. Let your thoughts wander now, drifting as gently as mist over the sand. You have traveled far tonight, across centuries, across sea and memory, and now you are home again, surrounded by the warmth of old stones and the soft promise of tomorrow. The past is not a chain, but a path. Each step you take brings you deeper into rest, into peace. Let go of all that clings, all that tugs at your heart. Let your breath grow slower, your shoulders lighter, your eyes heavy with calm. Trust that the world can change, and so can you, that the future will hold both sorrow and wonder, and that you will meet it gently, bravely, as you always have. Sleep well, traveler. The story is safe. You are safe. Sweet dreams.